Welcome to the English Epics channel. Initially, we were just neighbors who had moved into a new neighborhood around the same time. The six of us were approximately the same age. My wife, Claudine, was 6 months pregnant when we moved in, while the couple across the street, Sal and Carrie, had a 2-year-old child. Ginny and Jeff completed our sex debt when they moved into the house next door with their 1-year-old daughter. As you can imagine, over the years, with all the mothers having children of similar ages, our wives became close friends, and we, the men, grew quite close as well. After 5 years of living in our little community, there were 7 children among us. Thanks to mentoring, parent committees, school events, pool parties, and similar activities, we had almost become one big family. Our kids grew up together, but even after 20 years, no romantic relationships ever developed among them. By the time I turned 49, I was the oldest in our group, while Carrie, at 42, was the youngest. Everyone else's ages fell somewhere in between. Ginny and Jeff had 3 children, 2 of whom were in college, while their youngest son was in middle school. Sal and Carrie's twin daughters were in their senior year of high school. Our eldest daughter, Chelsea, was studying at Pennsylvania State University, and our son, Devin, had joined the Navy after graduating from high school. So now, we were all empty nesters. All the wives eventually returned to work. When we first moved into this neighborhood, all our families were facing financial challenges, like most young couples. Now, to varying degrees, we were all financially secure. My Claudine is a practicing nurse and works for a large medical organization in our area. Carrie works as an accountant for a lumber supply company, and Ginny opened her own flower shop after working for a small store whose owners decided to retire. Just a slice of middle America. Some were Democrats, some were Republicans. All of us were, at least nominally, Christians, except for Sal and Carrie, who regularly attended Catholic Massachusetts. The rest of us Christians attended services on Christmas, Easter, and special occasions. We all sincerely enjoyed each other's company and maintained a genuine friendship. Over the years, we learned to avoid discussions about politics and religion, except for the most general topics. It's not that we didn't have other friends or acquaintances, both in the neighborhood and beyond, but we were a close-knit group. As time went on and our children grew up, our dependence on one another lessened, and we gradually transitioned to a different kind of relationship. This shift was influenced by the decreasing need to share responsibilities, such as participating in parent committees, picking up kids from sports or school events, or helping each other out with babysitting duties. At some point, we realized that we were growing apart. Although I don't know who suggested it, we decided to meet on the first and third Fridays of each month for poker nights. We didn't always play poker. Sometimes it was canasta. We tried playing bridge. But none of us had the enthusiasm to really master it. Our wives, being the better organizers, constantly switched up the themes for our gatherings. We had international cuisine dinners, chili cook-offs, trivia nights, classic movie evenings, and even the old standby charades. No one ever drank excessively, but none of us were teetotalers either, so the hosts always had a good supply of wine, beer, and spirits. Despite being close friends, there was little to no flirting among us. Occasional jokes didn't count. Sex wasn't a topic of discussion unless it was about the latest escapade of a politician or a celebrity. All our wives were still attractive. A few extra pounds here and there, but they all kept themselves in good shape and dressed to highlight their best features, without being provocative. Of course, I'm biased, but my wife was the most stunning in our group. Standing at 163 centimeters tall, weighing 52 kilograms, with short chestnut hair, green eyes, and a size 3 figure, she was the quintessential girl next door. We had been married for almost 26 years, and apart from the amazing sex, at least, twice a week, I could count on one hand the number of serious arguments we'd had over the years. No, our sex life hadn't diminished. Everything was great until about a month ago when I visited a client for a quarterly audit. I am a self-employed accountant specializing in small and medium-sized corporate clients. Most of my clients have a gross income of less than 10 million, and I visit their offices every 3 months to review their general ledgers, prepare state and federal tax filings, and verify employee insurance. I was in the office of Max Tolson, one of my oldest clients, whom I also considered a friend. He and his late wife, Sylvia, had attended many parties at our house, and we have been guests at theirs as well. Max wasn't in the office when I arrived to start my work, so his accountant, Louise, set me up in the conference room to begin. Max showed up around 1 in the afternoon, and, engrossed in my work, I barely noticed when he sat down across from me at the large conference table. Max is a heavy-set, sociable man in his 60s, and I've always enjoyed his company. He has a disdainful attitude toward many things, especially politicians, so our conversations usually included shared contempt for almost every elected official, local, state, and federal. When I realized it was him sitting across from me, I looked up and smiled in greeting. When he began to speak, he seemed sad and hesitant. "Charlie, I'm so sorry for you and Claudine. I thought you guys were solid as a rock." I looked at him questioningly. My curiosity was piqued, but I was confident that whatever he thought he knew was a mistake. "So what have you heard?" I asked with a smirk. He looked embarrassed as he continued. Damn, did I just put my foot in my mouth? It was a rhetorical question, but I replied, "Max, what did you hear? What made you think my family isn't solid?" Judging by the expression on his face, it seemed as if he'd gladly activate an ejector seat, shoot through the ceiling, and escape through the roof. "Max," I continued patiently, "we've been friends for years. What exactly did you hear, and who did you hear it from?" Finally, he took a deep breath and asked, "Are you and Claudine okay? Are you still together, not divorcing or anything like that?" I just shook my head. "Damn it," he exclaimed, "me and my big damn mouth. Listen, Charlie, forget I said anything. I'm an idiot and I probably mixed up names. I'm getting old, you know. Sometimes I walk into a room and forget why the hell I went in there. I know it's to grab something, but I'll be damned if I can remember what." Max's repertoire of expressions harkened back to the days when he was just starting his business and regularly got his hands dirty, but I knew he was just stalling for time. Max still hadn't convinced me because he wasn't stupid or forgetful. "Come on, Max, cut the crap," I said more firmly than I had intended. My initial surprise at his question had morphed into something closer to suspicion. "Fine. All right. Anyway, it probably doesn't mean anything," he said dismissively, waving his hand. Really, I didn't hear anything. Before I could object to what was clearly another stalling tactic, he continued, "I've been having some issues with high blood pressure, and my doctor changed my prescription and made me visit him twice a week so he could monitor it. He's one of those doctors who works in the same office as your wife. About a month ago, I had one of those appointments. I was waiting at the reception desk when the doctor walked past me. Damn kid, he muttered to no one in particular, avoiding eye contact. Anyway, the girl at the desk eventually called my name and told me to go to room D, saying the doc would be in shortly. Now, I don't hear very well, but I'm too proud to admit it, though I was pretty sure she said D. All the doors were closed, so when I got to the one labeled D, I slowly opened it to peek inside before stepping in. I didn't want to walk in on some poor guy getting a finger in a glove shoved where the sun doesn't shine. Anyway, he sighed reluctantly. That's when I saw them. I saw Claudine and some guy in green scrubs, the kind all patients wear in hospitals and doctors' offices these days. I like it when you can tell who's who right away. Doctors wear ties with 3/4-length white coats and have stethoscopes around their necks. Nurses have starched white uniforms with caps from nursing school. Nurse assistants wear scrubs, and janitors look like custodians. With all this political correctness nowadays, it's better to know who's touching you. Max faltered again, and the look on his face made it clear he didn't want to continue. My heart was pounding, but as calmly as I could, I said, "Max, It seems like what you saw isn't something I want to hear, but I need to hear it. You've opened a can of worms, and there's no way to shove the genie back into the bottle. Trying to inject a bit of levity, I certainly didn't. Feel, I added. Max, I know you feel awkward, but I promise not to shoot the messenger. Ah, hell, he proclaimed. They didn't hear me click the door shut, and I can tell you, Charlie, I damn near crapped my pants. Apparently, Max thought he had fulfilled his obligation to fully disclose the situation. But there was no way I was going to let him leave something this serious so vague. So I pressed him. Max, did you see them kissing? Did she peck him on the lips? Were they hugging? Were they making out? Were their bodies pressed against each other? What did it look like? Give me something, Max. Damn it, he exclaimed. Yeah, they were kissing and standing pretty close to each other. And he slid his hand under her blouse, whatever you want to call that. It looked like it was much more than just a peck on the lips. As far as I could tell, he was a young guy, with curly chestnut hair, probably in his early 30s. I didn't get a good look at him. After shutting the door behind me, I went back to the reception desk, where they told me I was supposed to be in room B, not D. When my doctor finally came in, my damn blood pressure was 240 over 122. He even wanted to admit me to the hospital. God forbid. Later, when I thought about what I'd seen, I figured you and Claudine must be splitting up, and that's why I opened my big mouth. I had no idea how long I sat there with my head down, but then I felt Max standing behind me, massaging my shoulders. He leaned down and, in a soft voice, said, Charlie, I want to tell you something I've never told anyone else, something I'm deeply ashamed of. I love my Sylvia with all my heart and soul. When she died, I wanted to die too, just so I could be with her. Still, we're all human, and we all make mistakes. About 20 years ago, I was at a convention. My business was starting to take off, and I had money in my pocket. I felt like I was on top of the world. I was young. The drinks and hormones were flowing, and I invited a woman. We spent the whole night together. She was married, attending a different convention, and if my life depended on it, I couldn't tell you her name or even what she looked like. All I remember is waking up alone with a splitting headache and the memory of what I'd done. I, the great Max, cried into my pillow over my own betrayal. If there is a God in a heaven, I know Sylvia will find out what I did. I just pray she forgives me so we can be together again someday. Listen, Charlie. What I saw might have been nothing more than a one-time flirtation, a moment of human weakness. Please, think about that before you do anything. Now tears were streaming down my face, which I tried unsuccessfully to hide. I reached over my shoulder, patted Max's hand, and said in a trembling voice, I don't think I can stay here and keep working. My mind is elsewhere now. In the booming voice that sounded more like the Max I'd known for years, he bellowed, To hell with taxes and to hell with the corrupt, blood-sucking government. Get out of here. You can finish it another time. I thought long and hard about what Max had said about human weakness. And while kissing and groping alone might not be enough to end the marriage, I believed in the old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. After leaving Max's office and knowing Claudine was at work, I went straight home. Deciding to play detective, I rummaged through drawers, looking for any underwear I didn't recognize. I even checked the laundry basket for anything that might show some evidence. After half an hour of fruitless searching, I gave up. It was clear that if there were any clues, they'd be in her purse or her phone. My wife works from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. When she came home, she found me in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on the meal I had prepared. An open bottle of Chardonnay sat on the table. She kissed me lightly on the lips and poured herself a glass of wine. Our conversation over dinner was somewhat disjointed because I couldn't get the image of what Max had described out of my head. After dinner, we watched TV, mostly in silence. Even Claudine didn't notice the change in my behavior, or if she did, she didn't say anything. When we finally went to bed, Claudine disappeared into her walk-in closet and emerged wearing my favorite purple plush teddy and smelling of my favorite perfume. She slipped into bed beside me and leaned in for a deep kiss, her hand gently resting on my thigh. After a moment, she teased playfully. Looks like someone needs a little encouragement tonight. I couldn't help but overthink her choice of words, wondering if it meant anything deeper. But those thoughts began to fade as her gentle touch brought us closer. That night, Claudine was unusually passionate, showing affection and intimacy in a way that made me forget my doubts. She knew exactly how to make me feel connected to her, and we shared a moment of closeness that reminded me why we had been together all these years. Though she wasn't one to speak much during these moments, her quiet expressions and affectionate gestures told me everything I needed to know. She fell asleep quickly, but Max's revelations kept me awake for a long time. Being my own boss, I decided to head into the office a bit later the next morning. Claudine gave me a passionate kiss before jumping into the shower to get ready for her shift. She walked into the bathroom naked, and I couldn't help but admire her beauty. I prayed she wasn't sharing it with someone else. I was in a more relaxed mood as I went downstairs to make some coffee. Without a doubt, the previous night's intimacy had helped ease my paranoia a bit. Maybe it was just a one-time moment of weakness, I thought. After all, it had been almost a month since Max saw her at the office, and how could a woman who professed to love me and showed such unrestrained passion just a few hours ago have a lover on the side? Besides, I reasoned, when would she even have time for a lover? Sure, a kiss and a quick grope in an empty exam room, but certainly not full-blown sex in a busy medical office. She never worked late. There were no girls' nights out, no bowling trips, nothing. All of this could simply be a case of jumping to conclusions over nothing. I tried to stay optimistic, but I couldn't ignore the fact that even a simple kiss and allowing another man to touch her was already something. As this thought crossed my mind, Claudine walked into the kitchen dressed in her scrubs, and I noticed how easily accessible her chest seemed in the loose-fitting outfit. If something was going on, I had to know if something had been going on and it was already over. Well, I suppose I would never find out. Nevertheless, later that same morning I chose a detective agency from the Yellow Pages that was near my office and scheduled an appointment for that very day. The sign on the door read, Mellon, Detective Agency. Upon entering the office, I was surprised to see an attractive woman in her 50s. She had silver hair, a beautiful figure, and an unusually large chest that was noticeable even under her blazer. After I introduced myself, she extended her hand and said, "Hi, I'm in Mellon." I immediately felt embarrassed. An involuntary chuckle escaped my throat. I started to apologize, but she cut me off with a resigned tone. Yes, don't worry. I've been getting jokes about my name since I was 16. I learned that she was a retired NYPD detective and had the same sarcastic wit and cynical demeanor often portrayed in TV police dramas. After I explained why I had come to her and what I needed to know, she asked me all the relevant questions: age, children, sex life, professions, and so on. Then she asked a question I wasn't prepared for and frankly found offensive. "Mr. Manza, have you ever cheated on your wife?" She noticed the irritation on my face, and when I responded firmly, "Never," she continued, explaining that she herself had been through similar situations multiple times with different spouses. "Mr. Manza." "Charlie," I interrupted. "Charlie," she continued. "The reason I had to ask that question is that sometimes a spouse cheats as revenge for a real or imagined infidelity by their partner. Right now, all you have is an unsubstantiated claim that about a month ago, someone allegedly saw your wife being kissed and touched. On top of that, you've told me she has no opportunity for an affair and your sex life at home is good and consistent. So speaking in police terms, I'd say, however, if you're willing to spend the money to ease your mind, I'm more than happy to accept it." I signed the contract and paid her retainer fee. At home, everything was normal. Claudine was as affectionate and cheerful as ever, and I was starting to believe that maybe Max had been mistaken. By the following Monday, I hadn't heard anything from him. Realizing that I'd probably accumulated quite a few billable hours at work, I decided I'd call her by the end of the day and terminate the investigation shortly after lunch, and called me herself. In her usual enigmatic tone, she said, "Charlie, I'm pretty sure I've got everything I need. Could you come by my office before 5 and I've got a date tonight, and I don't want to rush getting ready for it." I arrived at her office at 4:30, and to say I was a little apprehensive would be an understatement. She hadn't hinted at any results over the phone, which put me on edge. When I got there, she gestured for me to sit down across from her desk. Although she wasn't exactly a warm and fuzzy person, I noticed a subtle change in her demeanor, something that made me slightly uneasy. Before I could say anything, she slid a manila envelope across the desk to me and, in a softer voice, said, "You know, Charlie, the best part of this lousy job is when I can tell a spouse they've got it all wrong and there's no evidence of infidelity." My sigh of relief was cut short when she continued, "Unfortunately, this isn't one of those cases. This is the kind of case that makes me hate my job." My heart was pounding and I had to force myself to breathe. As for any involvement with a coworker, I can't say definitively, since I couldn't freely walk around the medical office building. However, twice last week, first on Monday, she left work around 1 p.m., presumably for lunch, drove 2 blocks to an apartment complex, and entered a studio apartment. She stayed there for just under an hour, and after she left, no one else came out. I waited until she was gone, and about 10 minutes later, a man exited the same apartment, got into his car, and drove off. It doesn't appear to be the guy your friend described, as this man was around 40 with gray hair. On Tuesday and Wednesday, she went to lunch with a coworker, but on Thursday she followed the same pattern as Monday. Again, she stayed in the apartment for about an hour, but this time they left together, and before she got into her car, they shared a kiss that was far from casual. The apartment is on the ground floor, and unlike the previous visit, there was a large enough gap in the curtains for me to take some photos while they were inside. All the relevant details are in the report, including time-stamped photos of them in the apartment, her arrival and departure, their kiss, and his personal information, which I obtained from his license plate, and a cross-check of the apartment rental records. She took a deep breath before continuing. "Charlie, I'm going to give you some unsolicited but good advice. Don't open the envelope. Just give it to your attorney if divorce is the path you intend to take." She paused before continuing. "But I know you won't take my advice. I didn't listen when it happened to me. There's a bit of a masochist in all of us that only deepens the pain. I'm about to give you the most cliched advice, but it's true. Sometimes good people do bad things, but that doesn't necessarily make them bad people. Do yourself a favor. Make this as painless as possible for yourself and your family. Revenge eats away at the soul." She walked around the desk as I stood, struggling to hold back tears. She kissed me gently on the cheek, and no longer resembling the hardened detective, said, "Please don't do anything reckless, Charlie. I know you're hurting. I've been in your shoes, but life moves on, and time really does heal all wounds." I returned to my office, and before opening the envelope, I texted Claudine, "I'm having some issues with an audit that's due tomorrow. I'll be late. Don't wait up." The final words were stuck in my throat, but their absence would have been too obvious. Love, Charlie. I suppose we all have masochistic tendencies, because I did the exact opposite of what my detective recommended. I opened the envelope. The report was quite detailed, with names, dates, durations of visits, and a very general description of what was on the CD, and had labeled it as intimate sexual contact. Hesitant and with trembling fingers, I inserted the disc into the player, and after about 10 minutes of watching the footage, I did exactly what and had warned me against. I began planning my revenge when I got home and entered our bedroom. Claudine was asleep. Watching her chest rise and fall, her chestnut hair framing her face on the pillow, and the seemingly peaceful innocence of her sleep, I wondered where it all went wrong. For a moment, I thought that maybe I should talk to her. If we went to a counselor, perhaps we could save the marriage. But then I remembered the recording I had seen just an hour ago, where she lay on top of him. No amount of counseling, no number of tears, could erase the image of her kneeling on the bed, gripping the headboard. How long, I asked myself, has this been going on? How many others has she betrayed me with? The truth was, I didn't want to. No. The answers would only serve to torment my already shattered heart. When I woke up the next morning after a restless night, Claudine was no longer in bed. The smell of freshly brewed coffee wafted up the stairs from the kitchen. The smell, which once brought me comfort and a sense of security, now turned my stomach. Claudine was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and finishing a yogurt, when she saw me enter. She looked at me with concern and asked, "Are you okay, baby? You were tossing and turning all night?" "Yeah," I replied. "Just an upset stomach. I'm fine now." She seemed relieved, though I couldn't tell if it was because I was. Feeling better or because she was glad my restlessness wasn't caused by suspicions of her infidelity. Either way, she cheerfully said, "Don't forget, we're hosting poker night this Friday. The girls and I were thinking of doing a Chase Days theme. What do you think?" At that moment, a vague plan began to form in my mind, and I said, "I have a better idea. I want to host the evening, you know, with a bit of a twist." "All right," she said with a grin, "as long as it doesn't involve us girls going topless." "Don't worry, darling," I said sarcastically. "I wouldn't want my wife showing off her chest. To anyone, not even our friends." With equal sarcasm, she replied, "Oh, really? I'm pretty sure I've caught you checking out Ginny's cleavage more than once." Forcing a laugh, I said, "Well, there's a big difference between looking and touching." Apparently my comment went right over her head because she simply placed her cup in the sink, kissed me on the cheek, and left for work. My plan was still in the development stage. That day, I spent several hours gathering what I needed, and another couple of hours the next day collecting the data and materials required to make my plan work. Honestly, I came up with an excellent concept, one that I could probably sell if it didn't have such terrible consequences. I managed to avoid having sex with my wife on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, but on Thursday when we went to bed, Claudine refused to take no for an answer. Despite my reluctance, she quickly got what she wanted. Since it was Thursday, I assumed she might have already had her lover's attention during lunch, and I thought, damn it, why should I be deprived of her talent? A few minutes later, I was in a state of bliss, and since Claudine loved giving almost as much as receiving, she too trembled with pleasure. On Friday, after our friends arrived, we settled in the living room, enjoying cocktails and some pre-packaged snacks I had picked up at the supermarket. The conversation was light, mostly about our kids, work, neighborhood events, and similar topics. Ginny looked stunningly sexy. Showing off her cleavage, she turned to me and said, "So, Charlie, I hear you've come up with a new game for us tonight. Are we girls in for something exciting?" "Exactly," I replied. "I think the game is very engaging, and I spent quite a bit of time organizing it. We'll move to the dining room, where each place is marked with a name tag. There's also paper and a pen for each player. Since I created the game and know the answers, I'll act as the moderator and timekeeper. The name tags are numbered from 1 to 10, with each number having 4 subsections, A, B, C, and D. I'll pass around 10 pictures, one at a time, and each player will have 30 seconds to write down their answers before passing the picture to the person on their right. The photos feature pairs, some famous, some not so much. Each question is worth 4 points. For example, let's say the photo shows Laurel and Hardy. A player gets all 4 points if they know both the first and last names of each person. If they only know the last names, they get 2 points. If they know Stan Laurel but can't remember that Hardy's first name is Oliver, they get 3 points. In other words, each first and last name is worth half a point. If the photo featured Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, but the player could only recall Humphrey Bogart and not his movie partner, they would earn just 1 point for the entire round. Any questions? Oh, and all the pictures are connected by a theme. At any time, anyone can shout out what they think the theme is. However, if you're wrong, you lose a point for every incorrect guess. If you're right, 2 points will be added to your final score. I arranged the seating so that Claudia was at the head of the table, with me to her right. To my right sat Jeff, and next to him on the same side of the table was his wife, Ginny. Across from Ginny was Carrie's seat. To Carrie's right sat her husband, Sal, and to his right, completing the circle, was Claudine. All the games we had played up to this point seemed insignificant, and everyone appeared enthusiastic about the prospect of something uniquely challenging. Remember, I warned, don't let your neighbors see the picture, as that would give them the advantage of extra time. The game began, and I handed the first photo to Jeff face down, starting the stopwatch. I started with what I thought was one of the easiest pairs, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. I saw Jeff smile as he quickly wrote down his answers within 10 seconds. After I called time, he passed the photo face down to Carrie, who seemed less confident than her husband. She scribbled something down and, after a 5-second hesitation, looked a bit frustrated as she flipped the photo over and passed it along. When the photo finally reached Claudine, she seemed pleased and quickly jotted down her answers. The next photo featured Arnold Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver. Everyone appeared confident in their responses. The third photo showed Al, Gore and Tipper Gore, and this one took the players a little longer since it was probably trickier to recall Mrs. Gore's first name. This was followed by a photo of Jerry Lewis and Patty Lewis. They were married for 38 years, but even I wouldn't have had the slightest idea of her name if I hadn't found it online. Next were Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon, which everyone seemed to enjoy. The following photo was a tough one, Reba McEntire and Narvel Blackstock. There were plenty of good-natured complaints like, oh, come on, that's not fair. Who the hell even knows them? Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston brought smiles to everyone's faces, while Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes elicited a similar reaction. At that point, Jeff, who seemed the most confident, declared, I want to take a guess at the theme. Sorry, Jeff, I said, doing my best impression of the foghorn sound from old game shows. The next photos featured Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe, followed by Mickey Hargitay and Jane Mansfield. Everyone leaned back in their chairs, and there were plenty of comments about how well I had done creating the game. We're not done yet, I proclaimed. I've got a bonus photo, and each correct answer will earn 3 bonus points, but you only have 5 seconds. Everyone seemed excited at the chance to earn more points, but I took my time handing the photo to Jeff, whose face held a confident smile. However, when he flipped it over, his smile vanished, and he didn't even reach for his pen. He just sat there, staring at the image with a blank expression. Sal laughed and said, Wow, this one must be tough. I hit the stopwatch and said in a commanding tone, Time's up, Jeff. Pass the photo to Ginny. Without flipping it face down, he handed the photo to Ginny, who was smiling triumphantly at his inability to identify the people in the picture. But when she finally looked down and saw the set of 4 images on the 8x 10-inch sheet, she gasped, dropped the photo, and covered her mouth with her hand. One image showed Claudine on the bed in an intimate position. Another depicted her in a compromising pose with someone. The next showed her in a situation suggesting close physical contact. The final image captured her kneeling near the bed, engaging in an act of intimacy. The recognizable face of the man was clearly visible in almost all the photos. Time's up, Ginny. Give Carrie a chance, I said cheerfully. Ginny looked at me sadly, but made no move to pass the photo. Carrie laughed and said, Come on, give the rest of us a chance, as she reached over and slid the photo toward herself. Carrie looked at the images blankly, seemingly without emotion. but eventually reached for the glass bowl of onion dip in the center of the table. With a scream of, "You damn bastard!" she hurled the bowl at Sal's face. Sal was knocked out of his chair, trying to wipe the onion dip and the blood, streaming from his nose off his eyes and face. Jeff and Ginny sat stoically watching the scene unfold, while Claudine stood frozen with a stunned expression. Sal tried to get up, shouting, "What the hell?" Carrie grabbed the photos, which Claudine was staring at in shock, shoved them into her husband's face, and growled, "This is what the hell, you slimy piece of crap?" With those words, she kicked him square in the groin, as Sal curled up into a fetal position. Carrie walked around the table, approached Claudine, who had wrapped her arms around herself and was quietly sobbing, and slapped her across the face so hard that my wife staggered and shattered a porcelain vase. Carrie turned and, glaring disdainfully at her groaning husband, hissed, "Don't even think about coming home, you unfaithful bastard, not tonight, not ever." Then she stormed out of the room. Aside from Claudine's muffled sobs, the room fell into dead silence until I mumbled, "By the way, the theme for tonight was divorced couples. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of English Epics. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye."